Hello and welcome to the Foot Health Show here on UK Health Radio, your global, real, feel-good radio station. My name is Peter Allton of Circle Podiatry, and it's my aim to raise your awareness of just how important your feet are, to give you the solutions to your foot and leg problems, and to teach you how to prevent future problems. So grab a cuppa, relax, sit back and put your feet up, and enjoy learning about the one part of your body that often gets forgotten. That's right, it's your feet. Hello and welcome back to the Foot Health Show, the show which aims to help you to be able to live with healthy feet for the rest of your life. Hello and welcome to the Foot Health Show. Once again, thank you so much for joining us if you're a regular here, and if it is your first time, then thank you for tuning in and giving us a chance. This is a show that teaches you all about your feet, foot health, and how you can best look after them, how you can best manage them to allow you to do all the things that you want to do with them long into old age. Too many people end up not being able to use their feet for things that they would otherwise have been able to, just because they've really not paid attention to them during their life. So I'm glad that you're not one of them, or at least I hope you're not one of them who's at the point later in life where you can't do as much as you could. If you are, then go and see a podiatrist, because quite often we can pick up the pieces, so to speak, and try and help you to be a little bit more able. But if you are tuning in as a youngster and you haven't got any problems at the moment, beware, because all too often things do catch up with you. And before you know it, you're in desperate need of our services. Anyway, what have I been up to this week? Well, I'm pleased to say that I have been using my feet this week. Hopefully you have as well. Hopefully you've been making the most of getting out in the limited amount of sunshine we've had recently, intermingled with showers. Hopefully you've been able to maybe go for some walks in the park and see some of the spring flowers that are coming up, and the buds that are beginning to come on some of the trees, blossom on some of them even. I actually have been doing, and I've been keeping a bit quiet about this over the last few months, but since the end of January, I've been doing Couch to 5K. Now, if you don't know what Couch to 5K is, and you're not able to run 5K, or you're not that active, it might be worth looking into it, because some of you will know that I've been nursing an injury for the past couple of years, really, with one of my knees, which was playing up, and that actually did lead to a foot problem as well, which was niggling. But anyway, I managed to resolve that, but every time I tried to get back into running, my knee would start to play up again. And I was trying to be gradual, but then I decided, you know what, I'm going to be really disciplined on being extremely gradual. So I did the Couch to 5K, and you do start off really, really easy. Like I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's sort of like 30 seconds of running and 90 seconds of walking and another 30 seconds. It's a really, really light way of starting off, and it goes on for 9 weeks, building up with a virtual coach to being able to run for half an hour at the end. And my goal was to be able to run 5K in the half hour, which I used to be able to do. I look back on one of my apps, Maps Where I Run, and the last time that I did it sub 30 minutes was back in 2019, I believe, because of these injuries I've had. Anyway, yesterday I was able to do it in 29 minutes and 5 seconds, which was a real boost for me, because that takes me back a few years. Anyway, I am hoping to increase on that, or decrease on it, should I say? Maybe increase the mileage and decrease the time. And I just encourage you don't have to be doing it that fast or whatever. It doesn't have to be 5K, but just getting out there to do something in a disciplined way, and use the coaches on there. It's a free app. Check it out. So hopefully, as I say, you are using your feet for whatever it might be, for walking, for running, for dancing, for work maybe, whatever it might be. I appreciate the fact that you've tuned in to listen to what we've got to say today on how you can best look after them, and best really get the opportunity to use them for as many years as possible to come. If you're young listening, it seems a distant thing when you wouldn't be able to walk because of your feet. But in my clinic, I get people, even youngsters, who've sprung a problem up with a painful corn, or an ingrown toenail, or painful verruca, or a sports injury, which is stopping them from doing what they want to do. So I encourage you, carry on listening to this show. Tune in from time to time, every week, every couple of weeks at the moment. I'm doing new shows. Pressures have been on a little bit. We should have another one next week because it's, of course, a special time being over Easter. And everyone's getting more active. We've got the clocks have sprung forward and we've got that extra time of daylight. You actually get home and you see your garden in the daylight now. It's amazing. It's brilliant. Except that the garden is calling me out to go and get it tidied up, especially as we got a party next week, which probably won't be in the garden, but people will be able to see it through the windows, and it ain't looking too tidy at the moment. Anyway, enough of me waffling on here. I will get straight into the show. Anyway, moving on to the show for this week, I've got quite a lot in store for you, actually, and which is a bit of a crazy idea, you might say. You might well say, especially when you hear what it's all about. But I've got a very tenuous link in my first song to what the topic's going to be. I don't think you're going to clock on to what the topic is going to be, because it's a very tenuous link. In fact, the second song would give you a much better idea, but I don't want to give it away that easily. And I like this song. It's one from when I was a kid, a film that came out when I was a kid, and it was a beautiful song by Art Garfunkel. And the song is called Bright Eyes. Okay, so I'm going to play that song. Many of you will know that it is from the film Watership Down. And there's a vague link in the characters of that film as to what we're going to be talking about this week. That's all I'm going to say for now. Very, very, very tenuous link to the topic that we're going to be talking about this week. And I was thinking, well, what can I do this week? What can I talk about this week? My mind went to March. Okay, what's March all about? Well, I came up with the idea of the Mad March Hare. That's the tenuous link. The hare and the rabbit. Okay? So apologies for that one. I know some of you are cringing. Some of you are thinking, oh my goodness, he's lost the plot. Anyway, Mad March Hare. That's what we're going to be looking at today. The Mad March Hare. And some of you, of course, in some countries may not know what on earth I'm talking about regarding that. Well, over here in the UK, and I guess in many countries as well, in springtime, when the weather's beginning to get a bit warmer and the plants are beginning to grow and it's a bit more, everything's coming to life. The birds are starting to nest, and it's in March that the hares, which are these animals like rabbits, a bit bigger than rabbits, and they behave in a what can appear like an erratic way as they start trying to court their prospective partners, and they start doing this funny dance, and it got the nickname of a Mad March Hare. And then from there, you might hear it being said in a conversation. If someone's a bit mad, they might say you're as mad as a March Hare, and that's where the saying came from, for those of you who aren't aware of it. So anyway, Mad March Hare, what on earth is he going on about? What is that got to do with feet, you are wondering? Well, I can twist most things around to talk about something to do with the feet, and I'm going to do that today for you. And the first thing is I'm going to use each of the words, Mad, March, and Hare, okay? And the first thing is mad. Mad. What has mad got to do with feet? Well, I'm going to offend some of you, probably offend most of you. And I'm going to suggest that if you've never had your feet checked, it's madness. Why haven't you had your feet checked? Because the average person in their lifetime walks around the world 5 times around the world. And yet, the vast majority of people, and in my practice in Circle Podiatry, we did a survey some years ago now, and I'm sure if I did it again, it would be pretty much the same. But when we did it then, we asked people how many of them had been to see a podiatrist before. And over 80% said they'd never been to a podiatrist. So that's 80% of the general population who have never been to have their feet checked. And yet, they're on this journey that's going to take them 5 times around the world. And that's what I mean by it's madness if you're not getting your feet checked. Because, well, if you were to drive, let's say you're in the States, if you were to drive across the state border from one state to another, maybe you're going to drive across America. Even in the UK here, just driving from London up to Scotland, you would get your car checked. You'd check your tyres, you'd check your tyre pressure, you maybe check your oil level. You would get your car checked because the last thing you want is for it to break down on you. And yet your feet You're born with those feet, you grow up with those feet, and you expect them to carry you 5 times around the world without ever getting them checked. You wait until they break down on you. You wait until something goes wrong. And that's when you come in to us and expect us to do a miracle and sort it all out for you. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we just have to control the damage that's been done. We just have to go on a damage limitation exercise. So I want to suggest to you that you might not want to be classified as mad in any other way. And hopefully you won't be wanting to be classified as mad in this way. If you've never had your feet checked, then I want to encourage you, please get yourself down to your local podiatrist. Go and get your feet checked. Do you know what we actually check when we see you? You know, people come to me with a verruca or with an ingrown toenail or with a heel pain or maybe with with a fungal infection. All sorts of things they come to me with. And then we do what's called a foot health check, a foot health assessment. It's like an MOT of the feet. And without any exceptions, people are amazed at the depth we go into and just how complex the feet are. So if you come along to see me at Circle Podiatry, and if you go along to any podiatrist, you should get some tests done on what you can feel. You should be tested to see if you can sense properly with your feet. And that's empowering, because if you can't, then you know you need to be a bit more careful, and particularly if you've got diabetes. And if we find that you can't feel and you didn't know that, and you haven't had tests for diabetes, we'll probably send you down to your GP to get some blood tests done. And the number of people with diabetes around the world who don't know they've got it is phenomenal. About 50% of people with diabetes don't know they've got it. So you could be one of those, and yet you aren't aware that you can't feel properly. Because you don't, it's a very gradual process. The loss of sensation in the feet is extremely gradual, and sometimes it's a hypersensitivity before a loss of sensation, but it's very gradual, and it can creep up on you. I call it the grandparent effect, because when you've got little children, you don't really see them changing, but the grandparents do see them changing because they don't see them that often. Your feet, you're living with them. You don't get to see the changes. But if we do the tests, we will see how they've changed. So that's what I mean by the importance of getting your feet checked out. Checking out whether you can feel things properly. Checking out what your circulation is like. Checking out, have you got infections in the toenails or in between the toes? Have you got, God forbid it, have you got a melanoma, skin cancer? And then there's also the whole issue of, what are you walking about on? How are your feet performing? Are they causing problems? Because the vast majority of us have not got a foot structure which is ideal, and pretty much every single one of us is not walking around as God intended. We are not walking around on uneven surfaces, barefoot, with our foot doing all sorts of things and all the muscles in the foot getting worked. We walk in shoes pretty much on flat, hard surfaces, and that's not what we're designed to do, really. We're going to take a quick break from the show now, so please don't go away. It's just time for our station sponsors to share a message about their product. Please hang on, and we'll be back in just a minute to continue the show.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
That was an ad from our station sponsors. You're listening to the Foot Health Show here on UK Health Radio, your global, real, feel-good radio station. So let's get on with the show again. Back to our interview. The vast majority of us can benefit from some intervention to try and help our foot to behave more normally in the environment it's in, and thereby changing the forces going through the bones, through the joints, up into the ankle, up into the knees, up into the hips and into the back. The way that your foot works dictates the way that your leg works, the way that your gait is, your posture. And so, just like if your car tyre is wearing out a bit unevenly on one side, you might want to know what the cause of it is. You might want to fix that problem with the car so it doesn't happen again. Same with your shoes. They can show uneven wear if your foot structure is abnormal and your foot is functioning abnormally. So check your shoes out. Are the wear marks uneven on the forefoot, on the heel? Are they uneven? Are they more on one side than on the other side? Maybe your left's wearing down quicker than your right. Maybe you've got a leg length difference. The point is, you probably are not a foot expert. Myself and my colleagues around the world who are podiatrists are foot experts. And therefore, with all the experience we've got, with all the studying we've got, really, it is madness not to get a professional opinion on how your feet are working and whether they are likely to cause you problems later on if they're not already. Just imagine that trip around the world with your car, or that trip up to Scotland or across the States, and not getting it checked out, and it breaking down halfway around whatever trip you're doing. You would feel stupid for having not checked that your tyres were going bald, or that you had a slow puncture, or that there wasn't enough oil in the car. You would feel stupid. And yet, so many of us end up with problems in our feet later in life, and we haven't done anything about it. We've never looked into it. Probably we don't feel stupid because we still, at that point, don't really know that we could have looked into it. But that's the good thing. You're listening to this, so you know now you can look into it. And not only you, but what about your family? What about your loved ones? Why don't you think maybe of your daughter or your son, getting them for their birthday maybe. Get them a voucher for a podiatry appointment somewhere. If they're younger, then maybe they wouldn't appreciate that on their birthday as a voucher, but maybe you can just take them along. So my point is, don't be the Mad March Hare. Don't be mad when it comes to your feet. Make sure you find out, are they fit for purpose? Are they going to take you those 5 times around the world? Or will they get you 4 times around and then give up? 3 times around and then give up? Or will they take you 5 times around, but you'll be suffering in the long run? Because that's what tends to happen. The thing I hear most of all from my clients, my elderly clients that come into me, is, I wish I had heard this earlier. I wish I knew about this earlier. I would have done something about it. Well, you're in the lucky position, listeners, that you are hearing about it earlier. The question is, are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to be, later on, as an elderly person, thinking, oh my goodness, that silly bloke, I remember him on the radio talking about Mad March Hares, and oh my goodness, what he said actually was true. I should have looked into it. Look how my toes are gnarled up now. Look at how my bunion's formed. Look at how this pain I'm getting in my right heel. I can't walk properly. Look at how it's affecting my life. Look, I didn't know I had diabetes, and there was complications because I wasn't aware that I'd lost sensation. So please, and I'm not trying to tout for business here. You can come and see me if you want to. Of course you can, but I can't see all of you. There are practices around the world in many countries, not in all countries by a long stretch, and that's something we're trying to work on. But there are practices. If you're in America, if you're in the UK, then definitely you will find podiatry practices quite conveniently. So look them up. Check out. If you want to find one in the UK, go to the Royal College of Podiatry.org.uk, rcop.org.uk. If you want to come and see me, then please do come along to, check the website out first of all and book an appointment, but go to www.circlepodiatry.co.uk. You can book online, or you can give us a call and have a conversation. And even if it's just coming in for a checkup and you've got nothing you're really concerned about, it would still make sense. You're booking your MOT. You may not be concerned about anything, but you book it in. And mainly it's because you legally have to. But, it's a good idea to have that MOT because it picks up on things. Same thing with your feet. So that's the mad bit of the Mad March Hare. The name of the Mad March Hare as my feature for this week. Okay, I'm using it to describe 3 different things that we're going to be talking about that can happen with the feet. And the first one before this was about being mad if you don't get your feet checked out. Rewind and listen to that if you have joined us during that song. The next bit, so that was the mad bit. Next bit is the march. So Mad March Hare. What is march? What's that got all to do with your feet? Well, there is a particular condition, which some of you will be aware of, called a march fracture. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit today. Okay, so what is a march fracture? Well, the name comes from soldiers who, in the wars in the past, have done a lot of marching. And when you march long distances, there's a lot of force that goes through the foot. You're normally putting more force through than if you actually are walking normally. And even if you're walking normally for long distances or you're running, there's a lot of force that goes through your foot. And the foot is amazing, by the way. I talked earlier on about getting your foot checked and the foot structure. There's 26 bones in each foot. Both feet together have got a quarter of the bones of your body in it. And not only that, but every step you take, they have to perform amazing features. Leonardo da Vinci said they're a work of art and a masterpiece of engineering. And why did he say that? Well, because they are an amazing piece of engineering when you think about what they have to do. Every single step you take. First of all, the forces going through them. When your foot hits the ground when you're walking, it's about 1.5 times your body weight. And when your foot hits the ground when you're running, it's about 4.5 times your body weight. But the amazing thing about them is that when they hit the ground, they have to serve a totally different purpose and be in a totally different state to when they leave the ground. So as you hit the ground, they need to roll in. The arches roll in. And what happens there is it creates an unlocking of the bones in the foot. It's a motion called pronation, and it provides shock absorption up the body. And then as the foot comes down to the ground, it is supposed to be able to adapt to all those uneven surfaces that we're designed for our feet to be hitting. So the forest floor or the beach or the field or whatever it might be. But it's uneven and we don't know what our foot is going to have to do as it hits the ground. It's supposed to be able to adapt. And then what should happen is that the heel lifts, and as it lifts, you don't want a floppy, loose bag of bones that can adapt. You want a rigid lever, and it has to suddenly become a rigid lever to propel you forwards. And that can go wrong in so many ways. Both the way that the foot rolls in, but also and unlocks, but also the way that it forms this rigid lever. And that's why I say it's so important that we do look into it. Anyway, getting back to the march bit, well, when you are marching or walking or running for that matter, as a foot levers you forward, there's a lot of force that goes through it, and particularly through the metatarsal bones. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what are the metatarsal bones? Now, if you've been in the UK here, some of the footballers over the last 10, 20 years or so have had fractures of metatarsal, so you probably are a little bit clued into what that is. But the metatarsals, they're the long bones within the foot, okay? So you've got your toes, you've got the different bones in the toes, and then those toe bones join to metatarsals. And the joints there are in the ball of the foot, if you like. And then those metatarsals go right the way back to the mid-foot. And they're quite long bones, and they are very prone, particularly the second and third ones, which quite often are longer than the first one. They are particularly prone to getting a lot of pressure on them, which they can handle usually. But if you're suddenly doing a lot of exercise, repeated exercise, and it may just be something as simple as walking or marching, but obviously with running, as I said earlier, there's a lot more force going through, then you are quite likely to get a fracture in that area. And it can be something as minor as a little stress fracture, which can still be very uncomfortable. And these are what we call march fractures. You can have a more extreme fracture where it literally does break, and you literally have got loose ends of the bone in there. But a march fracture is usually a stress fracture, and it's usually the far end, the distal 1/3 of the metatarsals, and it's because of recurrent stress. Okay, I actually think that I had a mild one after I did my marathon, because the area of my third metatarsal, it started to swell up a little bit, and there was a bit of bruising there afterwards, and rest was what I had to do to settle that down. So the most common places for the second or third metatarsal, so that's the long bone behind the second toe and the third toe. Your big toe is the one we call the first toe, just so you know which side we're working from. So the second and the third metatarsal, the most common place. So if you're getting a pain in that area and you've done a lot of exercise recently, or you've upped your exercise, then it's quite likely that this can happen. It can be people, they go on holiday, walking holiday, and they haven't done any training for it, and they're suddenly doing a lot of walking. That can be it. Or it could be suddenly upping your mileage when you're running. It could be that you've just not got the right shoes for the job as well, and then you're overdoing it with the wrong shoes, which isn't helpful either. Usually with this as well, with march fractures, it's not normally an acute onset. You don't suddenly feel that pain. It's usually a bit of a gradual thing, and the intensity and like an ache can really begin to build up. Sometimes there can even be a cramp-like pain, and it's in the forefoot, in the front of your foot. As I said with mine, sometimes you can get a bit of swelling, particularly on the top of the foot. You wouldn't really notice it underneath, but on the top of the foot particularly, you would notice that. And one thing you can do yourself to see if there's something going on there is to move each toe one by one and see if a particular metatarsal causes the pain. There can be other things that can cause it pain there as well. Capsulitis, neuromas, all sorts of other things can cause pain there. But particularly if you press and move around on the top of the joint associated with that bone around that area, then you may well be able to find an area of tenderness there. Another tip, if you've got something, we use a tuning fork in clinic, but it did strike me the other day that if you've got an electric toothbrush, when you use an electric toothbrush, the handle vibrates quite a lot. Well, if you put the end of your electric toothbrush, probably not the mouth bit you put in your mouth, but the other end of it, onto the bone that you think is affected, that vibration may well make it more painful. It's one of the tests we do. Vibration on a fracture will generally cause an increase in pain, so that you can do a little bit of sort of self-diagnosis almost. Quite often it will ache even when you haven't got weight on it. You're in bed and you can still feel it aching away. You might want to go and get a proper diagnosis done on it. X-ray often won't show it up. It's too small a crack, too small of a fracture there. But a CT scan or an MRI may help with that diagnosis. Now, the problem comes with treatment, because people who get these tend to be very active, okay? And the last thing they want is to have to stop being active. So reduction of movement is one of the key things for helping with this. And that is not just resting generally, but actually having a very stiff stoled shoe, so your foot's not going to be bending so much, can help. And you may well need to be in a cast, and that can be either an air cast or it could be even a plaster cast. But you quite often have to have your foot immobilized so that there isn't any movement in that area. And then, longer term, because stress fractures generally come because of that, of doing too much too quickly, certainly if you're getting back into exercise, then a gradual process, don't do anything too quickly. And again, if you've seen a podiatrist, they will have probably told you whether or not they think you would benefit from having some functional orthoses. Now, these are insoles that change the way your foot functions, so that we can change the forces going through your foot, because it's the forces going through your foot that have caused the problem in the first place. And if you don't address them and you go back to doing all that exercise again, likelihood is you're going to have the same problem again, or another 6 weeks of not doing much, or having your foot in a cast, which you probably don't want. So I'm going to suggest that you get your feet checked out first, listen to what the podiatrist is saying, look at the wear marks on your soles. That will probably tell you whether there is abnormal forces going through parts of your foot, and then make an informed and wise decision whether you're going to do something to intervene to try and prevent this sort of thing from happening. So, Mad March Hares. Look, if you've joined us, I'm not going to explain it all now, because it's going to the listeners who've been here all the show will be glad I'm not going to explain it all now. Just rewind, go back and listen to it again. Okay, listen to it from the beginning. That's a good thing about these shows. You can rewind. Okay, and yeah, it's well, blow my own trumpet and say what it is worth listening to. Okay, I think the lessons that we're learning, or that you're learning, are ones that hopefully will make a difference in your life. So please do go back and listen to why we're talking about Mad March Hares. We talked about the mad bit, we talked about the march bit, and now we're going to talk about the hare bit. And we're not just talking about the rabbit type of hare. It's a play on words. We're obviously talking about hares, as in what's on top of your head, or for some of you, maybe it's not on top of your head, I don't know. But anyway, hares. What's hares got to do with feet? Well, there's two angles I wanted to come at with this. Two things to talk about regarding hair and feet. First of all, have you got hairy feet? Okay. Gents, have you got hairy feet? Ladies, have you got hairy feet? Well, quite often we get people coming into us, and of course they have shaved the hair off their feet, ladies generally. Guys tend to just leave it there, but that's a bit of a broad generalization. But have you got hairs on your feet? Did you used to have hairs on your feet, and now you haven't got hairs on your feet, and you don't really do anything to get rid of them? You see, hairs on the feet is a normal thing. By the way, I am talking about on the tops of the feet now, and particularly on the tops of the toes and the tops of the top of the foot where the metatarsals are. That is normal, okay? If you've got hairs under your feet, on the sole of your feet, that ain't so normal, okay? And I haven't actually seen that yet, although I have, and I will be talking about that in a minute. That's got you intrigued, isn't it? No, we're talking first about hairs on top of your feet, okay? Now, it is normal to have them. And the problem is that sometimes they disappear. And I'm not talking about the shaving here. I'm talking about they naturally disappear. And it tends to be as you get older that they disappear. Now, I don't want any of you running off worrying about this, but at the same time, it is something that we sometimes pick up on, is that if your circulation into your feet is particularly bad, then you are likely to have lost your hairs on your feet. Okay, so it's one of the signs of the circulation not being quite so good. Now, if you're coming to see a podiatrist anyway, they will be doing tests on your feet. They'll be listening to your circulation. We use a Doppler to listen to the pulses into the feet. And again, it amazes my clients when they come to me that you can actually hear your heartbeat in your feet. There's two main arteries into your feet we listen for. There are others as well, but the two main ones that we listen for. And we can tell whether or not the arteries are furred up or not, whether there's an irregularity of the heartbeat, of course. And quite often we are having to, well, I say quite often, not that often, but sometimes we are having to refer people to the doctor to get checked out. Sometimes it means going on statins to try and prevent some of the clogging up of the arteries. Sometimes I've even had people who have had to go on to medication for arrhythmia. In extreme cases, sometimes we see people 1 year and they're okay, another year and they're not, and we've had people who have been put on pacemakers as a result of just having their foot health check. So, if you've lost your hairs on your feet and you haven't done anything to lose them, then it might be worth getting your circulation checked out, particularly if you are getting on in years. If your circulation isn't that good and you've lost your hairs, you're probably going to have thinner looking skin. Probably there'll be some discoloration there, and probably it'll be a lot drier as well. So it isn't usually just the hair loss. So those other things are things to look out for as well. We're going to take a quick break from the show now, so please don't go away. It's just time for our station sponsors to share a message about their product. Please hang on, and we'll be back in just a minute to continue the show.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
That was an ad from our station sponsors. You're listening to the Foot Health Show here on UK Health Radio, your global, real, feel-good radio station. So let's get on with the show again. Back to our interview. Okay, so back to talking about hair on the feet. Although actually, we're now going to move on to talking about hair in the feet. You remember earlier on, I talked about it's quite natural to have hair on tops of your feet, but I'm yet to see hair growing on the bottom of the feet, on the sole of the feet, and that's because there are not hair follicles there, so you won't get hair there. And the exception to that is when you have hair that is a foreign body in your foot. You may be thinking, well, what on earth is he going on about now? Foreign bodies? Are we talking about immigration here? What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about hairs from another source, and it could be from your own head, it could be from somebody else, it could be from your dog. A hair that has got embedded in the sole of your foot. And you might think, well, surely that doesn't happen. It does, and it happens quite regularly. I definitely see, I don't know, somewhere between maybe 5 or 10 a year, where we get people that they've got a little bit of hair that has somehow embedded itself in the sole of their foot, and it works its way in. And sometimes it works itself in quite a long way before the person's aware of it. It doesn't really hurt, but then when it gets in a certain distance, that's when then it may get an infection in there, and that's when they come to us. And sometimes we see this little black dot. We cut away the dead skin around it, and the black dot becomes obvious that it's a hair, and then we get hold of it with some tweezers and pull it, and you might have an inch of hair that has worked its way into the foot. And it can be quite uncomfortable for something so fine and small. If it gets infected, it can be quite uncomfortable, and in fact it can be very dangerous for people, of course, with diabetes, where infection is dangerous of any source on the foot. So if you've got pets, particularly dogs, but the hair is coarser. If you've got coarse hair yourself, and if you're a hairdresser, we see hairdressers coming in with this if they're wearing open sandals to do their hair cutting in the summer. Hairs can work their way into your skin. If you have got pets, then what I would suggest you do is you actually, from time to time, you hoover out your shoes and your slippers particularly. Because what happens is that it seems to be when the foot is in contact with that hair for any given amount of time, just a little end of that hair just makes its way into your skin somehow, and then when you wash, it won't come off because it's got that little bit embedded in, and then you put it back in a sock or shoe, or your slipper, and the pressure continues, and it continues to work its way in, and then and we see them at different stages. I had one lady actually once who I think she had a couple of dogs. I reckon the dogs were bored. The amount of hair she ended up having in her feet. I think it all ended up in her feet. No, not quite, but quite often we would have 4 or 5, I think 6 was the most I had, hairs embedded in her feet. Now, her hygiene wasn't great, shall we say. And her trainers certainly had more hair on them than I think the dog did. The hair was all inside it. You took the inner soles out, and it was just smothered in hair. And that's why it was getting onto her. She was wearing her trainers, barefoot, hairs in there, and the hairs would just dig into her flesh. So I usually say this to people who have this sort of issue going on where they get a hair in their foot. Just from time to time, just vacuum out your shoes, your trainers, your slippers, particularly somewhere where you might have your foot in there barefoot. Slippers are often the culprits. Just vacuum them out and make sure there ain't no hairs in there, and that should help you out. And if you've got diabetes, then if you've got some loss of sensation, you should be checking your feet anyway. So hopefully you would see something very early on before it's really got embedded in. So that's my second story about hairs on this feature, this March feature show that I'm doing on the Mad March Hare. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have joined us halfway through, or just recently, then please do go back and listen to the rest of it, because the bit about the mad, are you mad? Then, hey, check it out. The bit about March, that's all about March fractures. Check it out. And then the 2 bits about hairs. Hairs on your feet and hairs in your feet. Definitely worth listening to if you have just missed it. So thank you for joining me today, and have a fantastic week ahead.